Is it deja vu or is it just paranoia? You know, a lot of people and a lot of buzz is going around talking about how today's market feels really similar to 2007, 2008, before we experienced a giant crash in the real estate industry. So today I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna react to a video from Fox News Business talking about this exact thing. And let's take a look. Is there similar things? Is this true? Are we on the precipice of a crash, or are we experiencing a shift that could be happening in the market right here at the very moment? Let's take a minute, dive into the video, and find out.
There's one real estate analyst who says the housing market looks a lot like it did in 2008. Ouch, at least for home builders, that is. He posted a picture from a building site in Florida with over 20 completed houses for sale. They were advertising 0% down mortgages. They're trying to move the inventory. Not having much luck.
Okay, already I find this a little bit interesting. So they've switched the premise from is the market going to crash to at least for builders. Builders advertising 0% down loans is kind of not a new thing, especially here in West Michigan. A builder doesn't care how much you put down on your home, quite frankly. That means nothing to them. What matters to that builder is, were you able to close at the agreed upon price at the agreed upon time? If you paid cash, the builder's fine with it. If you put 20% down, the builder's fine with it. If you put 30% down, the builder still doesn't care. And the same thing as it goes down. 5% down, builder's fine with that too. In our areas, builders have always been open to 0 down VA loans. They've also been open to FHA with 3.5% down. So I don't know that the builder advertising 0% down loans is necessarily a sign that we're on the verge of a collapse like 2008. Now, one of the things that we do see that builders are looking to incentivize, especially here locally, a lot of them are helping with a credit to buy down your interest rate so that you're looking at a monthly lower down payment. Is that a sign that the market's going to crash? No, but it's the same thing as an auto dealer that might offer an incentive or a rebate when you buy a new car. It's to help incentivize you to buy new versus used. Definitely doesn't sound like the precipice of a crash here.
Global host Katrina Campion's with me here in New York right now. Is the housing market about to crash?
No. The market conditions now are very different than we had in 2008. First of all, Americans have a large amount of equity in their homes, right? And despite economic fluctuations, home values have remained strong. We also have seen a lack of inventory in the market now.
Okay, she's got a good point. There is still a lot of equity for people in the market. And yes, there's no doubt we've seen some really rapid appreciation in the past few years. But I would have to agree with her. One of the big reasons that we're not on the precipice of a giant crash would absolutely be the fact that inventory has stayed low. While we've seen some rises in certain areas, and there's no doubt areas like Florida and certain areas of Texas, they grew at a ridiculous rate as people left other states to move to theirs, especially during the COVID lockdowns. At this stage, however, even if your home went up in value 60, 70%, and now it's gone down 10, doesn't necessarily indicate that we're looking at a nationwide crash. A lot of those are a little bit more local. Also, I'm not sure I'd call that a crash when you're just starting to see a bit of a decline versus the crash we had in 2008, 2009, where at one point a lot of people were down almost 50% in the value of their home. So I have to agree with her on this one.
It's very difficult to make a blanket statement for the entire US, but for the most part, we haven't had enough inventory. Now, in February, we saw an increase of 30% inventory in the market compared to last year.
Okay, so yes, especially here in West Michigan, you do see more inventory. However, last year was a record low. So coming from a record low to a norm historically definitely is not going to indicate a crash as far as I'm concerned, that we're expanding out of control with inventory.
Texas that obviously have more inventory than others. But I think another good sign is that first-time home buyers have come into the market, and the share of first-time home buyers is actually rising, reaching 31%, which proves that the American dream is still alive, which I love. of.
All right, I'm going to have to agree with that too. Yeah, it does prove the American dream is still alive. However, we're not setting first-time homebuyers in a very great position. There's no doubt that what the average first-time homebuyer earns compared to what they have to spend has definitely not shifted in their favor. No question about that. The statistics prove it out over and over again. The other thing that is also problematic in my eyes here is that the average age of the first-time homebuyer keeps going up and up and up and up. So right now, I want to say it's 33 years old for the average first-time homebuyer, whereas in other times it was much, much lower than that.
If the market doesn't crash, but could you see some decline in home prices?
Well, I think we're going to see a decline in the amount of growth that you see across the entire nation. But I think the word crash is not going to happen.
Yeah,
I understand that it's a headline, but I don't see this. No, I think especially with the spring market here, I think we have a fresh new outlook, and with this administration, things are going to get better.
Okay, so I'm going to have to agree with this one too. It's rare that I agree with this many points in a lot of these videos. Yes, I do also think that we do have some room for a decline for a few of the reasons that I just talked about. The reality is the average home has become very, very expensive, and with a lot of other things in the marketplace getting more expensive, it just puts more pressure on people's budgets time after time after time. So without a doubt, could we see a slight decline? Yeah, we could, but when you've gained 30 to 40% in the past few years alone, the reality is that decline isn't going to be overwhelming for most people, and it's certainly not going to be considered a crash. The reality is the home market can be cyclical. It's not always a straight rocket ship up or a straight drop to the bottom of the sea. A lot of times, as a matter of fact, those events are actually anomalies versus the typical steady rise slowly, and even in this case, we'll probably decline fairly slowly if we do see a decline at all.
You got to be very careful using emotive word like crash.
Exactly. It's definitely a headline, but it's not the truth.
And certainly not when you're dealing with the stock market. Next case.
So this guy's like, you got to be careful using a word like crash, but opens the video dramatically trying to grab your attention with the word crash. I'll just let that one sit for a minute.
Milwaukee experiencing an unexpected housing boom. This is according to Redfin. Home prices have surged 20% year on year there. That's a bigger increase than any other major metro area. Why Milwaukee?
Affordability. We've seen this in Ohio as well, right? So first-time homebuyers have had such a difficult time getting into the market because they can't find affordable options. And it's so incredibly difficult for home builders to build affordable homes because of supply chain issues, the cost of construction, and so forth. So we've seen these markets do extremely well because of that. Now, the problem in those markets is lack of supply.
Got it.
Which leads to higher prices. She's right. The problem is lack of supply, and it's going to lead to higher prices, which means those affordable markets won't stay affordable. Even Grand Rapids, we are also considered affordable market. So all you West and East Coast people paying all that kind of money, check us out. We're a great option. That being said, the reality is this market is definitely seeing some shifts because in certain areas, prices have outpaced people so much. Obviously, in Florida with the insurance situation, there is just a whole bunch of people who simply can no longer afford to live in those types of areas. So yes, they are seeking outside solutions. Places like Ohio, places like Milwaukee, all these lower priced affordable areas are starting to see more migration in. However, that typically will start to drive those prices up and forward, which really means what? We need to solve the problem of supply chain and skilled trades in the building industry. No question that builders are our answer of getting out of this. And I would say one of the problems is we kind of, as a society, or as a government as well, have incentivized them not to. I mean, it's more profitable for them to keep prices high. And of course, that is one of the issues. The other thing, of course, is there's so many barriers when it comes to completing a smaller home versus a larger home for the builder. So definitely an important point as we start to look at this. And I really do believe that creating more starter home supply is absolutely our answer to bringing balance to what's happening in the marketplace now. That being said, is that on anyone's radar in the government or in the industry? Clearly not. We talk about it, but not much happening on that front, that's for sure.
The real estate market slowly but surely will get better as interest rates come down. I don't see us getting back to 2 or 3%, but we do have a lot of cash buyers as well, and people that don't have mortgages and people that have mortgages over 6% that are entering the market now. And at some point, sellers have to sell.
Quick question. Which other areas fastest growing? I mean, Milwaukee's number one, I got it. What's number 2, 3, and 4? Do we know?
Well, we have Ohio, you have Milwaukee, you have areas that are affordable that are maybe not as popular as Florida and Texas, for instance. You know, a lot of places in the Midwest are doing well, and there's areas that are recuperating, like right now, you know, the South.
It used to be always Florida, Florida, Florida. Not
and
so
now we
much
have a little too much, and also insurance issues, property taxes,
Oh, yes, we do.
Let's see what happens with this new proposal to eliminate property taxes. I'm very excited about this. I think it would be phenomenal.
I do think that would also be interesting. So unproven. There's nowhere else in the nation that's eliminated property taxes. So very much that would be a canary in the coal mine. That being said, clearly that money's going somewhere, right? Typically 5 to 12, and in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars in Florida in some of the mansions on the coast. Without that revenue, how do some of these places operate? That'll be another interesting one to see. And of course, it's not actually passed as of yet. So definitely one to watch as we go forward, maybe even worth its own video. All right, there you have it. What do you guys think? Just let me know in the comments. I'm curious. When it comes to the market crash, is that what we're looking at as we come into the future? Or are we simply looking at a bump in the road based on some supply and some issues with the cost of financing? Also, the reality, I wonder this too, and I'm curious what you guys think. If your market is completely dependent upon interest rates, is it really a strong market, or is it artificially being propped up by the cost of lending at this phase? And also, if it is, how are we seeing some regulation or protection from our government when it comes to the cost of lending and interest rates, especially if so many people's livelihood and quality of life is going to be attached to it? There's no doubt that the crash in 2008 ruined a lot of people's lives, and blaming it on the buyers is definitely not a realistic scenario when you look at how that unfolded. And if we were to see another crash and many people's lives were ruined from it, is it time at this stage for the government to step in and maybe supply some stability to the interest rates and to the cost of lending, at least on homes, if not in other places? Obviously, if you were to finance a new snowmobile, it's not the same thing as buying your primary residence and, you know, looking to have stability and keeping kids in schools and all the things that go with it. I'm just curious, tell me what your thoughts are. Leave them in the comments. If you were thinking about buying a home in West Michigan, reach out to me. My contact information is in the description below, and I would absolutely love to help you find the right house for you and your family.